In the previous video, we talked about a production possibilities frontier, what it meant, and we showed how if this was the PPF for the US and you plotted it, you would get the blue line there. And this equation is the PPF for Cuba, and if you plotted it, you would get the red line there, making the blue line the PPF for the US and the red line the PPF for Cuba. The purpose of this video is to talk about something called opportunity cost of production. And we say for the U.S., if they produce one more beer, how much sugar do they have to give up? After all, to put more resources into beer production, you have to take resources away from sugar production if the U.S. only produces beer and sugar. And these opportunity cost questions, that's what we're trying to answer here. Let's first look at the U.S. and say what is the opportunity cost of beer production for the U.S. And we can start at any point, but I'm going to say that the U.S. is currently right here, where they're producing 5 beer and 5 sugar, and we're asking what's the opportunity cost of 1 beer, meaning if we produce 1 more beer, how much sugar do we give up? Well, we're currently at 5, so to produce 1 more beer, we're going up to 6 beers, which means we must be at this point, and we had to give up 1 sugar because we go from 5 to 4 sugar. So to get 1 more beer, we give up 1 sugar, so the opportunity cost of 1 beer is 1 sugar. Next, we do the same thing for Cuba. We say if they produce 1 more beer, how much sugar do they give up? And again, we can start anywhere, but let's say we start here where Cuba is producing 3 beer and 4 sugar. And if they get 1 more beer, that means they're going up from 3 beers to 4 beers, and they're going from this point to that point, which means they're going from 4 sugar to 2 sugar, and thus they're giving up 2 sugar. So for Cuba, the opportunity cost of producing 1 beer is 2 sugar. Now from this, we can see that the U.S. has an advantage in beer production, and specifically it has something we call a comparative advantage in beer production. And I say this not because the U.S. can produce more total beer than Cuba, but for the U.S., when it produces 1 beer, it only gives up 1 sugar, but for Cuba to produce 1 beer, it gives up 2 sugar. So the U.S. can really produce beer at a lower cost, and so the U.S. has a comparative advantage in beer. In a subsequent video, when we talk about gains from trade, you're going to see why that's so important. Now we're changing the question just a little bit, and instead of asking what's the comparative advantage in beer, we're going to ask what the comparative advantage of sugar is for the U.S. and Cuba, and we answer it in the same way. For U.S., let's suppose that we start at 5 beer and 5 sugar. For the U.S. to get 1 more sugar, it has to go from 5 to 6 sugar, which means we're going from here to here, which means we're going from 5 to 4 beer, and thus for the U.S. to produce 1 more sugar, it has to give up 1 beer. Next, we proceed to Cuba. Say if Cuba produces 1 more sugar, how much beer does it give up? As before, let's suppose we're starting off where Cuba is producing 4 sugar and 3 beer. And now they want 1 more sugar, so they want to go from 4 to 5 sugar, going from here to here. Well, now they just have to go from 3 to 2.5 beer. So going 3 to 2.5 beer, they're only giving up 1/2 of a beer. And from here we see that Cuba has a comparative advantage in sugar, because for the U.S. to produce sugar, we have to give up 1 whole beer, but for Cuba to produce sugar, it only has to give up 1/2 of a beer. So Cuba can produce sugar at a lower cost. It has a comparative advantage in sugar. You'll see why that's so important later. To summarize, these are the answers that we found. And I want to point out something here. For the U.S., notice that both opportunity costs, they are reciprocals of one another. The opportunity cost of beer is the reciprocal of the opportunity cost of sugar, and vice versa. The same thing is true for Cuba. The opportunity cost of beer is the inverse of the opportunity cost of sugar, and the opportunity cost of sugar is the opportunity cost of beer. So if you could just go through, if you were asked these questions and you just went ahead and found the opportunity cost for beer first, you don't even have to think much about the sugar. You just take the inverse of it. Finally, the next thing I'm going to show you is just another way of answering these same questions. This is the way I do it. Instead of looking at the graphs, I like to just go straight to the equation. And here, I've just, instead of said beer, I've said B. Instead of sugar, I've said S. And for Cuba, I have this equation. And suppose I want to know the opportunity cost of one sugar. And I notice that if S increases by 1 in this equation, because S is multiplied by negative 1/2, then it must be true that beer goes down by 1/2. And thus the opportunity cost of sugar is 1/2 beer. And then, because the opportunity costs of beer and sugar are inverse of one another, this means that the opportunity cost of beer is 1 divided by 1/2 equals to sugar. That's a quick way I have of answering them. And that concludes everything. And again, the main thing we want to do is to be able to know how to calculate opportunity cost of beer, opportunity cost of sugar from PPF curves, and to identify which region has the comparative advantage in beer and sugar.